On behalf of the University of Mississippi School of Education and the Department of Higher Education, Dean David Rock and Department Chair and Professor Neil Hutchins respectively, I welcome you to the Department of Higher Education Speaker Series. It is an extra special honor for me to introduce our speaker to you tonight because our very prominent speaker, Professor John Thelin of the University of Kentucky, was my doctoral chair, and he is a longtime mentor. A wise dean that I know has told me that there are no coincidences. I have come to believe him. This morning, when I arrived to my office, I retrieved a voice message from last evening. When it was an 859 area code number, I thought it was Professor Thelin and his wife Sharon telling me that they had arrived. But no, it was a student caller from the University of Kentucky phone-a-thon seeking a gift renewal. A coincidence? I think not. Clearly, it is not mere happenstance that when Professor Thelin was teaching me at the University of Kentucky, that a future University of Mississippi doctoral graduate that I would later teach and work with as his chair, David Coleman Barnes Jr., was a long snapper for the football Wildcats and a kinesiology major in the College of Education at UK. While a student, Coleman was nominated as an academic All-American and made the SEC Honor Roll. It is also not a coincidence that Coleman would later meet an Ole Miss alumna from Madison, Mississippi, Master's student in higher education, Mary Beth Justice, an admissions counselor and director for the Visit Days. They met in my History of Higher Education course. Their love bloomed as they pored over Professor Thelin's text. The first edition of the History of American Higher Education. They later married, and a gift from their family has supported the Higher Education Speaker Series. Something Professor Thelin taught me through his humble example is that it is a tremendous privilege to teach and work with students in higher education. He takes so much joy in his work. So his teaching has been a true gift that has come full circle. Just as I have been privileged to know and work with Professor John Thelin, it has also been my privilege to have known and be a professor to Mary Beth and Coleman Barnes, who have recently located with their two children, Caroline and William, to Morgantown, West Virginia, where Coleman serves as the Associate Athletics Director for the Mountaineers. Combined, Mary Beth and Coleman have over 30 years' experience as higher education professionals in support of students, including student athletes. We are so proud of them and their many accomplishments as University of Mississippi higher education alumni. And we are so very appreciative of them and their generosity to our program for this special gift of Professor Thelin's visit to our students. In fact, Coleman, who also read Professor Thelin's Gaines College's play, Scandal and Reform in Intercollegiate Athletics, upon my recommendation, reached out to me by email yesterday. He was so excited about our students having the opportunity to meet you. We are deeply gratified that Professor Thelin and his wife Sharon have joined us in Oxford tonight. Professor Thelin was a college student in the 60s, graduating from Brown in 1969. He then studied American history and history of education at the University of California, Berkeley, earning his master's degree in 1972 and later his doctoral degree as a Regents Fellow in 1973. This was almost, his graduation was almost 1 decade after the free speech movement emerged at Berkeley, when students protested a ban on on-campus political activities, student leaders taking cues from the civil rights movement and those in opposition to the Vietnam War. Tonight, he will share more with you about his observations and historical insights of this oft characterized as a tumultuous decade. And I am confident that from reading his work and from tonight's talk, you will leave with a richer understanding of the larger landscape of higher education in the 1960s, far expanded from the typically more narrow focus on student activism that captures the popular imagination of the era. 3 editions later of his widely read History of American Higher Education and the publication of his essential documents in the History of American Higher Education, which students are required to read, he is the preeminent scholar in higher education history today. As a historian, his record of books, peer-reviewed articles, scholarly essays, reviews, and editorials is extensive. He is a frequent contributor to Inside Higher Ed and the Chronicle, and something I appreciated as a Kentuckian and student, the Lexington Herald Leader. For our students, I want you to know that Professor Thelin has been the keynote at NASPA's conference, and that he is a former president of the Association for the Study of Higher Education, or ASH. He has been recognized with the association's Outstanding Research Award. Among other accolades, Professor Thelin has been honored as a scholar and researcher by the National Education Association, the American Educational Research Association, Division J on Post-Secondary Education, and the Council for Advancement and Support of Education. He was honored with the Marquis Lifetime Achievement Award by Who's Who Publications in 2017. Because we have so many students here this evening, I want you to also know that Professor Thelin has received the University of Kentucky Alumni Association's Great Teacher Award, the Provost Award for Teaching, and the Sturgill Award for Outstanding Faculty Contribution to Graduate Studies. To say he is a great teacher and mentor to graduate students who lovingly call him coach is an understatement. Simply put, you cannot attend an academic or professional conference in higher education, or even hold a book club discussion in Guidant Annex without meeting a former graduate student that he has mentored or taught. He is an absolutely delightful teacher in the classroom and legendary for his sense of humor. But more than all of this, he is a good person and a great colleague who teaches us the value of showing up to support each other as colleagues and scholars in the academy. Above all, it is his spirit of mentorship and collegiality that is truly an inspiration to those of us who have known him, and one that is so challenging to live up to. Thank you, Professor Thelin, for all that you've done for me and for so many other students. We warmly welcome you and Sharon to the University of Mississippi. Can we have help?
Would someone call security? Is that it? Thank you, Dean Amy Dolan-Wells. We're going to go back to the 60s and college in a moment. First, as a historian, I'm allowed to take you momentarily back to the 1950s. Well, by the way, I do judge books by their covers, sometimes getting around to me. But let us go back to 1953. This is Dartmouth College. The President of the United States at that time, Dwight D. Eisenhower, visited, and he exclaimed as he got out of his presidential limousine, says, "Dartmouth, why this is how I have always thought a college should look." Now bear in mind, this was taken in May in New Hampshire. Yesterday, when Sharon and I arrived and looked around, we said, now this is how we have always thought a university should look. So it is indeed an honor and a pleasure to be here at the University of Mississippi. And I do wish to acknowledge Dean David Rock and Dean of the Law School, Susan Duncan, who I believe is on injured reserve, but I thank her for her hospitality and allowing us to be here. And also I'd like to acknowledge, as Amy has mentioned a little bit, the generosity and support of the higher ed program alums, Coleman and Mary Beth Barnes. What greater tribute could you have for a program both to prepare them, and for them to show that back, and also what a placement service you have. So my gratitude to them for their making this event possible. One of the reasons that Ole Miss has impressed me beyond the obvious beautiful architecture and spatial design is that this afternoon Professor K.B. Malier manned the golf cart, and I had a wonderful tour. And just, I think it's not only the commentary on the buildings, but also the lore, the legends that brings the history to life, connecting past and present. So, KB, thank you so much for your information and hospitality. I'd like to note that, as Amy mentioned, our teaching and who we interact with, it is indeed a small world in higher education. And I'd like to acknowledge that Ole Miss tends to do its part in terms of interstate cooperation and harmony. So I would like to acknowledge and welcome one of my former doctoral students, who's now professor and chair of the Ed Policy Program at Mississippi State University, Dr. Eric Moyen. So it's good to see that my former students are gainfully employed. And also, I am very indebted to Professor and Department Chair Neil Hutchins, a longtime colleague and friend. We were corridor colleagues at the University of Kentucky. And one thing that's great is to see my colleagues and former students, good to see them thrive and to flourish in their own work. So, Neil, thank you for the invitation and arrangements. So let's go on. What I would say, the way I would sum up my impressions beyond the visual response to the Ole Miss campus is the sense I've had throughout the day, including the book discussion group, visiting various sites and buildings, talking with a number of graduate students and alums and staff and faculty, is that what comes across to me for Ole Miss is hospitality and heritage. And to complete that alliteration of H's, the hospitality and heritage are humbling. And it's just genuinely moving to see the morale and camaraderie and cooperation and engagement that you foster. And because a beautiful campus, yes, is beautiful, but ultimately you are the characters in the script that bring the campus to life, and so I thank you for that. So, let's go to college in the 60s. I did not choose this book cover. It was a wonderful graphic artist at Johns Hopkins University Press, and it captured and conveyed many messages or themes that I was trying to bring out in my own narrative. But what's interesting is that the students are quite well dressed. And they are, I think they are concerned, they have placards, they're demonstrating, but they also are polite and courteous. And that's an important theme that runs throughout my account of this decade, in that there is such an understandable attention to gravitate toward the most extreme images of, it could be, for example, burning an ROTC building or unruly students or whatever. What I would suggest, open to reconsideration, is that for the most part, students, if you looked at all colleges and universities across the United States, yes, there were very deep concerns with a number of very important issues. In the main, however, it was a very, I think, informed concern. It was polite, trying to play within the ground rules of civil behavior. There's certainly going to be some important departures from that, but I thought that this photograph, which actually is taken at the University of California, Berkeley in April of 1967. So that's ostensibly a very, very radical campus, allegedly marked by a lot of very severe disruptions. But here we are, this is getting pretty late in the decade. So I pointed that even at the most active, violent sites, we find civil behavior and I think informed concern and dissent. In contrast to that cover, I selected a number of photographs that tend to be the most photogenic in terms of media coverage or whatever at the time, ranging from the Harvard student strike in 1969. By the way, that is the same stadium that was central to the movie Love Story, in which Ryan O'Neal and Ally McGraw make snow angels on the football field. It's truly a multi-purpose. Then we have students at Columbia University and then at the University of Wisconsin. And this would be, I think, those indelible images that have tended to shape the popular portrayal. And I do not discount those, I don't dismiss them. I would, however, like to balance and leaven them with a range of other institutions and kinds of student conduct and behavior. Further example, here we have, for example, part of the Mississippi contribution to the saga of Jackson State. And then, of course, from May 1970, the student demonstration at Kent State in Ohio, with tragic incidents of National Guards troops firing on students. One reason I think that the Kent State episode was so important is that Kent State was and I've talked to some of you, or some who grew up in Ohio. Kent State was not a rebellious campus. It was largely a campus of first-gen, what we would call first-gen students. These were students that were preparing to be public school teachers, accountants, nurses, engineers. And so, to me, the fact that student dissent and then the strong, violent responses, the fact that this took place in Middle America, in the heartland, in a region and an institution that did not have a heritage and reputation for such dissidents, I think that showed the extent and the far-reaching by the end of the decade. And yes, of course, no account and memory of the decade would be complete without the inclusion of old myths. Interesting is that this comes early in 1962 with racial desegregation. But one reason I include these slides is that for me in my visit, it's not so much for me to tell, but I've learned a lot in listening, talking and listening to KD and other students or whatever. So I look forward to learning more about the heritage and the aftermath and the responses of the institution over time. Also, in my book, try to include the historical black colleges, which often are overlooked. So you go to either Greensboro, North Carolina, or the South Carolina State, institutions that did not have the publicity or the resources or reputation of some of the more prestigious, glamorous campuses. But it's important that their students be included in this saga. This is my own alma mater, Brown University, which is really it was called the quiet campus. I don't think it belonged to Society of Friends, or it wasn't like Gallaudet. But even at Brown, the African American students staged a protest and walkout that I think it came very late, like in 1969. I don't know how much of an impact that it made. And then more from Jackson State. So that gives you the range and geographically, institutionally, of student demonstrations. At the same time, in going to college in the 60s, what I think is important is that colleges were the darling of American life. Americans like colleges. It was interesting is we obviously associate, for example, big-time college sports as being the primary source of spotlight for our campuses, and understandably so. That is accurate. What was interesting that Hollywood tried to kind of cash in or extend the appeal of the campus beyond college sports, and one of the most successful popular shows starting in the early 60s was College Bowl. And it used the rubric of like jump ball questions, they had a halftime, they had a whistle, all the elements of an athletic contest that transferred to an intellectual, academic question and answer, something like Jeopardy, but many years before, pitting the, as they would say, the varsity scholars from Princeton versus, in this case, from Georgetown. Now, what's interesting in the slide that we have over here, an important breakthrough, and I want to make sure I get the name right. This was the victorious team from Agnes Scott College. Very important landmark. And first of all, this was the most popular show on Saturday nights for about 4 or 5 years, nationwide. Agnes Scott College defeated Princeton. And the shock that went through the always modest Princeton Tigers, that a women's college from the South had the audacity to trash them. Academic fisticuffs. And these are the varsity scholars in Agnes Scott College. If you will look, the second from the left was their captain. This is Susan Jewell. Susan's blind. And so that the visual cues and all the things, imagine being a defensive back or a tight end, blind. You know, all the visual cues of competition she did not have. But she developed some poise and devices to compensate for that. And she was generally the team leader. But she could not see the clock. I mean, questions were timed and whatever. But it's interesting, she would go on to earn a PhD at Harvard and a law degree from Duke. So this is, I believe, 1962, 63. That timing is very important because this was not an era in which women had great access to advanced graduate programs. Women had made great gains in terms of undergraduate enrollment, but to go on to Harvard for a PhD at a law degree from Duke, that was quite an accomplishment. And I think this was a portent, an omen of some of the accomplishments and gains that women would start to make in this decade as they came of age as members of the academic community. One of the themes that I try to bring before is that although there would be a lot of attention to political activism, concern about American foreign policy, rallies against the Vietnam War, my take is that for most of the decade of the 60s, there were some more fundamental issues that bothered students. And I devote a lot of time in my book not to going to college, but the idea was that in order to go to college, you had to apply to college. And what happens as a rite of initiation in American life is that college application, college preparation becomes an increasingly high-stakes, competitive activity, particularly among middle-class families. And so the common shared experience of all potential college students would be taking the Scholastic Aptitude Test or the ACT. And two artifacts of that are these just dreadful Saturday morning sessions, usually in a school cafeteria, with number 2 lead pencils. And I'm sure that several of you have already solved that problem during my remarks. And then the answer sheets. And it was a chilling experience that provided a kind of gallows humor bomb. And that people didn't talk about it much because they were fortunate to have survived. Now, of course, all of you, I'm confident, got near perfect scores on your verbal and quantitative sessions. But standardized testing and testing being used as a gatekeeper into college admissions became a new facet of growing up in America. Another thing that I have that relates to this is that if I were to characterize the college experience in the 60s, it was dominated by two features: crowding and competition. In a pre-computer era, waiting in the line to register for class. My goodness, you think you were trying to get Duke basketball tickets or something? No, the competition was for organic chemistry, for calculus. And here we have, for example, this is the University of Kentucky basketball arena that also did double duty for the ubiquitous course registration every semester. And it was a grueling experience. And there's always this uncertainty. Would I get the class I wanted? Would I be allowed into the major field that I wish to have? So it was a kind of like, the dilemma was that American higher education was pretty good at expanding access. So that, for example, I would say during the decade of the 60s, we went from maybe having, let's say, roughly a third of high school graduates going on for some kind of advanced study. And I think that would, by the end of the decade, that would approach more like 50 to 60%. We're almost doubling a percentage of students who go on to some advanced study. At the same time, not only doubling the percentage, the number of high school graduates doubled. Much larger cohort. So you're getting this kind of four factors, and so yes, students were admitted, but once arriving on campus, the treatment was, am I making noise?
That's right.
Better? Okay. I'm still making noise, but I hope this is more. It was not all a pleasant experience. I mean, there was this exhilaration of going to college, but once there, students were increasingly bothered. And they'd have, for example, lecture courses like Psych 101 that would have 500 students in it. And so this frustration among students is, why am I not enjoying this more? Why is the goal of going to college, why it is so problematic? And this would be an example. This is at Ohio State, no, excuse me, the Ohio State University, of an introductory economics class. They're obviously discussing widgets. Notice, once again, students are well dressed, courteous, whatever. They're crowded in like sardines. During this era, we start to see computers make some inroads into the administration of college enrollments. And this is an artifact. You can ask your grandparents about them. These are the initial computer programming cards. And so that a program, you carry around these stacks of cards. And if you misplaced one of them, the program would be dysfunctional or whatever. And students going through the enrollment process, they use that as their symbolic cue. What would be printed on these cards on the back, it would say, do not fold, spindle, or mutilate this card. And going like for penalty of death, I guess. So the students started wearing these buttons. I'm a human being, do not fold, spindle, or mutilate. And it was this idea of this kind of pushback of what students call the impersonality of the university. And my observation is that this would be the bedrock of student concerns, of what was the conduct of academic and campus life. This would precede large-scale concern with international events. And here'd be another example of final exams. Would be, once again, another bonding experience, unfortunately, not a pleasant one. And there were the ubiquitous form of exams called blue books, and in which you would have to write like in 2 hours or whatever. And it developed interesting strategies among undergraduates. There was, of course, in fraternities, not to be named, where the debate among the brothers was, could a graduate student really read 100 blue book exams and the grades had to be posted like within 48 hours? Was it humanly possible for a graduate student to read all these and make meaningful comments? Well, in the spirit of scientific inquiry, to test this, one daring student was writing along how on Beowulf, and in the middle of it, like on page 12, put in, attention, grader, please check this box if you've read this far. And then continued writing. Well, the student got the blue book back, and there was a red pen check marks in this little box. But in the Martin, the grader said, I read this far, but no further. Yeah. It was pretty harsh, uncaring. There are legends, for example, that like deans and administration, presidents and provosts, they would be kind and generous to parents, but once parents had packed up and gone away, usually there was a talk where the dean of freshmen would assemble here you are, the freshman class, and say something like, shake hands with your fellow student on the right of you, and the right and the left of you, and depending on the severity, you can say like, 1 out of 3 of you will be here for graduation, or 2 out of 3 of you will. But it was a very kind of mean-spirited, fatalistic view. Or the other would be that a professor assigned to teach a large introductory class would, in the opening lecture, remind the students, particularly, let us say, at large state universities, that, well, we may be required to enroll you, but there's nothing that says we have to keep you. And so there's an account that's talking to an alumnus of the University of Illinois, which is pretty remote. And the dean of students would arrange for extra buses to come to campus on the day after midterms, because they knew that the number of students who would fail and want to get home, or not go home, probably they didn't enlist in the military or whatever, but there was this kind of predictable harshness to student life that coexisted with the glamorization and popular appeal of going to college. One of the central figures who would be not only individually but also symbolic of a generation of university administrators was Clark Kerr, who would become president of the University of California and its 8-campus system. And at that time, Time magazine was one of the largest circulation weekly magazines, and there probably was no higher honor as a public figure in American life than to have your picture on the cover of Time magazine. And you can see this flow of students. Little wonder that the celebration from the academic leaders, they described the university that it was a knowledge factory. And they weren't kidding. And they weren't apologetic. That was considered a good thing. That was the model. It was a way to handle business expansion into mass or universal access to higher education. So he was highly praised. Now, there is something of a Greek tragedy, even though he was a Quaker. He said, the saying that even very smart people say dumb things. I hope I'm not yet into that group. But what he did was he would listen to students complaining about large classes, about his personality, about overcrowded dormitories, whatever. Then he was giving this kind of like statewide televised address to the State Chamber of Commerce. And he said, oh, I'm just so weary of these predictable complaints by students. That these, don't they realize how trite this is? That this is just a part of late adolescence. And students didn't think it was trite at all. And so as a university leader, I think it was symptomatic that you had a generation of administrators who were rather oblivious, rather callous to what were essentially meaningful, legitimate concerns raised by students about the quality and content of their educational experience. Now, what's interesting is that the students were not President Kerr's only problem. There was a newcomer to California state politics named Ronald Reagan, and that was confident his career would end as being governor of California. But in 1967, President Reagan, who was also in charge of the regents of the university, made some important decisions. They then interviewed Clark Kerr as he came out of the meeting, and he said, I came into the presidency of the university as I left it, fired with enthusiasm. And so here, within the span of about 3 or 4 years, the most popular, celebrated university president is then out of office in a political dispute. So it shows the volatility within the decade of how fortunes and careers, how quickly they could change. And here's just picked at random, the term knowledge factory. This is a chemistry building at a state university, and there, I hope that that's clean data that's going out of the smoke there. But the architecture of the period really did convey a kind of industrial model. So the metaphor was grounded in some good, solid examples. This is the University of California, Berkeley, 1964. Once again, what's interesting and would echo what I showed on the book cover is that yes, there were massive demonstrations, and here the issue was the right of student organizations to distribute leaflets and have speakers on a range of political activity. And what's interesting is that the students, they're wearing coats and ties. They're dressing up. They would have neatly trimmed beards. It was not this irresponsible, roguish behavior. Also, what's interesting is that where university administrators misjudge students is they would pass an edict outlining all tables of students' organizations, their card tables setting up to distribute posters and literature. Their intent was to drive out kind of far left political groups. What happened though, because they expelled all groups, it caused all these student groups that really disliked one another. So you had the young Republicans pulling together with the Marxists, and it brought the left and the right. So the administration's easy solution to one small problem actually was like throwing lighter fluid on the barbecue. And so students became more united in their kind of protest against administration. Two examples of the extremes in college behavior. You may have read last week that Jane Fonda, at the age of 81, was involved in a political demonstration. Here she is in 1960. She starred in a movie called Tall Story. The plot was at Custer College. She is a freshman, what was called a kind of co-ed. Tony Perkins, later famous in Psycho, David laughed, kind of back on his age. He's a star basketball player, kind of a campus hero. Think of those registration tables that I showed you earlier. Well, Tony Perkins goes up and registers or whatever it is, and then Jane Fonda is behind him, and the professor who's taking registration said, yes, miss, what course would you like to take? And this will be the voice of independent feminism. What she says is, I'll take what he's taking. And so it was this extended effort in the early 60s, where one of the sayings was, she didn't get her BA, but she got her MRS, was one of the standard lines of that era. But a little bit later in the decade, here's like University of Maryland, a relatively tranquil state university. We start to see students organizing, it would be like having students in the Grove or whatever, for a variety of political speakers or whatever. So we see this range within the decade of forms of student concern. Also, I mentioned earlier, like college bowls, the importance of college sports. Here I would suggest the extremes in this decade. To one side, we have Paul Bear Bryant at the University of Alabama after a big victory. At the same time, the breakthrough, for example, for women, including women of color. We have Wilma Rudolph winning one of 3 gold medals at the Rome Olympics. And what's interesting is that Wilma Rudolph competed for Tennessee State University, a historically black institution in Nashville, woefully underfunded. And there were no college teams. So they had a track club, and they would like pool their own money to drive in a station wagon to what were called amateur athletic meets. And yet women would prevail, and she would end up winning multiple gold medals in the Olympics. But with no support from like your school system or your colleges or whatever. So it's like success and achievement in spite of what the schools and colleges offer. Perry Wallace, the first African-American basketball player in the Southeast Conference, 1967. He would go on to earn his law degree at Columbia, and then he taught for 40 years at George Washington University in Washington, D.C. He died 2 years ago. And I read his memoir account. His family was from Nashville. He was an engineering major, an undergraduate, and playing SEC basketball. Quite a time demon for anyone. If you add to that the strain and pressures of being a pioneer, a very, very lonely life. Here I have from my own University of Kentucky their tribute to 4 African-American players who desegregated University of Kentucky football. What's interesting is that part of the American War, we talk about the level playing field, and that sports is an activity that transcends non-merit factors, that if you have what it takes, sports is where you can excel. But that's not true. In fact, particularly throughout the South, desegregation to enroll as a student went way ahead of participation in varsity athletics. A number of influential coaches blocked the participation of African American students, so that, for example, the University of Kentucky would desegregate in 1949, but would not have African American football players till 1969, and would not have an African American basketball player until, I believe, 1971. So, one thing to consider is that sports are not always on the vanguard of social reform and innovation. Sometimes they lag behind. Here we have these 2 scholar athletes were African Americans who became Rhodes Scholars. Albert Ellis, who would teach at the University of Pennsylvania, and this is Stan Sanders, who went to Whittier College. I actually watched him play in the early 60s. He was from South Central Los Angeles, Jefferson High School, and was a little All-American football player and javelin thrower, and then a Rhodes Scholar. And he would go on to Yale University Law School, and then would be a very active, prominent attorney and political candidate in Los Angeles for about 30 or 40 years. But the pioneering breakthrough of these exemplary students, it was against very, very great odds. And so they're among my heroes from the decade. Mentioned a little bit earlier Wilma Rudolph and Olympic track and field. What a difference a half century makes. Here we have the 2 foremost American, actually world swimmers of their respective era. Great similarities. Both, as high school seniors, won multiple gold medals in the Olympics in swimming. Both went to Stanford University. Some of the differences stop there. Chris von Salza entered Stanford University in 1960 after having won, I believe, 3 gold medals and 1 bronze through the
Women's Swimmer of the Year, she would never swim again competitively. There were no options for women at the college level. We would think, for example, today of Stanford University as being a leader in women's varsity sports, but in 1961, that was not the case. She would go on to be, she would major in Asian studies and would be a pioneer in computer science. But in terms of competitive swimming, her career was over at the age of 18. In contrast, Katie Ledecky, who won 3 gold medals and a silver, I believe, at the last Olympics. Katie entered Stanford University as a freshman after returning from the Olympics. She will swim competitively for Stanford on athletic grant and aid, which are probably, with Stanford tuition, probably worth about $70,000 a year. And she would lead the Stanford women's team to, I believe, 2 NCAA championships. And she also was an outstanding student. She was working as a research assistant in the psychology department. And then she forfeited, she chose not to compete her senior year. And that is because she signed a $7 million endorsement contract for, I believe, with Speedo. They have the brand wrong. But so here you have so many similarities, but look at the change that can take place in a half century. Some of you may recall Ralph Nader as a force in American reform, about unsafe cars, and also as an independent party political candidate. This is his smarter sister. This is Laura Nader, who was one of the first 4 women to be tenured as professors at the University of California, Berkeley. There's an interesting account when she joins the Berkeley faculty in, I think, 1962, early in our decade. And she's in the anthropology department. Faculty meetings were held at the faculty club. The faculty club was exclusively all male, by ordinance. She and her 2 colleagues who were women would get into the faculty meeting by climbing in through this tiny bathroom window and sneaking into the back of the magnificent meeting room. And so what it shows is even at what's supposed to be a very progressive, advanced university in a progressive state, the opportunities for women were not impossible, but they were very, very limited. And she retired a few years ago, but remained very active as a scholar, as an activist, and as a conscience. And interesting enough is that the faculty club, which denied her entrance, has now been renamed in her honor. That's a monument I like. I want to continue my theme because one of the major findings that came out of my research was the foothold and the persistent effort that women made in becoming full citizens in the academic community, not only enrolled students, but active. And here we have the first group of women in 1969 at Princeton, and a book that just came out about a year and a half ago called Keep the Damn Women Out. It's by Nancy Weiss Malcolm, who was, I believe, the first tenured woman professor at Princeton in the history department and long-time academic dean. And she took time to review her files and go through and write this analysis that has long been needed to tell. But what's interesting is that the place of women in the 60s, I feel, has been woefully a story that's undertold. And that if you look at a little bit later, around 1974, 75, we're going to see an increasing strand of women pressing for entrance into law school, med school, PhD programs. And that is a legacy of the 60s that I think stands as significant and important as any other that you might consider. One of the innovations of higher education in the 60s was this problem that if you're admitting more students, how do you achieve some kind of humane scale even as enrollments go up? This is an aerial view of the University of California, Santa Cruz, that opened in 1965. And it personified what was called the cluster college movement. It was an idea of taking like Oxford and Cambridge, a residential campus, and having smaller units. The slogan that the university advanced was, with the cluster college, they wanted to make the university seem smaller as it grew larger. And the blueprint was that a residential college would meet a certain admission size. Let's say you would have 300 students. They would live and study. And many campuses today have like live and learn centers. It was kind of the idea. And then when you reach that limit, then you would construct another cluster. So then you get this like honeycomb that would, no matter how large it grew in total enrollment, each student had an affiliation of living and learning with a manageable, humane size. And it coincided a lot, that structural change, with, in the late 60s, toward the counterculture, the summer of love, or whatever. I guess that's a Santa Cruz version of organic chemistry. Or maybe, I don't know. But what's interesting is that these actually, they were behind on construction. They didn't have the elaborate quadrangles finished. These were trailers. And the euphemism in their public relations material was encouraging students to enroll, said, you can be academic pioneers and live in the covered wagons of the 20th century. So parents are paying this. My son and daughter, they're looking at a trailer park. So there were a lot of interesting experiments with unexpected side effects. Here we have Columbia University, infamous student leader Mark Rudd, whose mother came from suburban New Jersey. My son, the revolutionary. And then we have some early signs of the women's movement in the late 60s at the University of Wisconsin of women trying to stake out their turf, their voice in this array of activism and events on the university campus. Fine, faculty belatedly become some involvement. I see the students as the prime movers in this, but we would have what we call teach-ins. And so you would have a panel of faculty speaking out on foreign policy or economics or whatever, and having the courage to take a counterintuitive stand to what the established policy and views. And so you would find at some campuses that attending teach-ins surpassed basketball attendance. So that's no small accomplishment. But it does show that there was a significant minority of faculty who I think did provide scholarship, teaching, and leadership in joining concern about a number of issues and causes. So that's my quick tour. Just think you went 10 years and I hope about 40 minutes. And so I welcome your memoirs, recollections, or insights on going to college in the 60s. Thank you.
So we definitely have some time for questions for Dr. Thelin, or as he said, comments, recollections. Since it's being taped, after someone asks a question, we don't have a hand around mic, we may repeat it, but we'll open the floor to you all now.
I'm almost as old as you are. I went to school in the early 70s, so just a touch after this, but this applies. The role of the war is absent beyond protest. But a lot of us went to college to avoid going to fight in the war. And that was kind of one of those rites and passages at the end that took the civility you talk about and starts to make it a little less civil. I just wonder if you had a talk about that a little better.
And so, John, the question was about the role of the war, the Vietnam War, in making things less civil, and the fact that there were a lot of students that went to college in relation to maybe avoiding military service. So, the Vietnam War and the role in this era.
I think that the primacy of opposition to the war and the anti-war movement would really spike in the late 60s and then going a little bit into the 70s. So as it comes to the latter part. Now, here's my impression. If you look at the composition of the American military, particularly enlisted, overwhelmingly with the class bias to it. It's overwhelmingly lower middle class, lower income, or whatever. The impact on the campus, which let us say was overwhelmingly in middle class institutions, still there was a significant impact. One would be students who had concern about policy in general. But the other is that every young man had to register for the draft. So the odds were slim, but they were always present that if you messed up, you were going to be drafted. And what's interesting is, we think of students being thrown out of school for something like burning a building. I've talked to many, many alums from the mid-60s, late 60s. They did something like, they accidentally broke a window, party. And they were like, petty pedestrian misbehaviors. But if you were out, your draft board would know. And you really were liable to be drafted. Another campus response was that for many juniors and seniors, young men, if they felt they were likely to be drafted, see, your draft deferment ended as soon as you completed your bachelor's degree or dropped out of undergraduate studies. There were not many deferments for graduate and professional school. What they did was many joined ROTC or went into officer training. So their estimate was they were going to be drafted. They were eligible for that. So therefore, they'd be better to go as an officer. So in terms of uncivil behavior, I think that we saw Kent State and other protests in the aftermath. So that one of my observations is that many things that we call the 60s actually happened in the 70s. That there actually was a remnant of demonstrations and student activism, mixed with counterculture that carried into the early 70s. But what was interesting is once the Vietnam War ended, a few years later, college enrollments actually dropped substantially. So that they're, particularly in community colleges, because these had been available, legitimate ways for young men to defer or delay being eligible for the draft. Once the war ended, the use of the community colleges as that safety valve suddenly was evaporated.
Down here.
So in the book you talk a little bit about how in the 60s we see increased educational opportunity and access. By the end you're concluding that since the 60s we've seen opportunity continue to increase, but also an increase in inequality that higher education has contributed to. Can you comment a little bit on maybe the missed opportunities
Sure.
in those moments?
Take one of the most volatile issues today is student loan indebtedness. Bad as that is, go back in time and imagine, well, one way to resolve that is to not have student loans. And what's interesting is that Pell Grants were not available until 1972. There were a few federal loan programs, usually for like children of veterans or whatever. So what you have to imagine is a world where what we take for granted in terms of state and federal student financial aid programs were either minuscule or non-existent. So now at the same time, price was relatively low. Many states had zero or low tuition. But the difference is that families, that just, for most American families, there wasn't a lot of reservoir to dig into. So there was this paradox, is college was reasonably affordable, but still lots of students could not go. But as I mentioned, the higher education enrollment pretty much like doubled in the course of the decade. So I think the opportunity was increasing. I also think the opportunity was uneven, in that you tended to be tracked into certain kinds of institutions. That every group, every denomination, every religious group had their own colleges. So there was a strong magnetism that if you were Methodist, you would go to a Methodist college. And within the state systems, there was a pretty sophisticated tracking where your socioeconomic elite would go to the flagship state university. More of what we consider your first-gen students are going to go to the regional campus, and then what was then called junior colleges would be the safety valve. It had pretty much open admission. So I think there were substantial gains, but they were very incomplete. And once again, this paradox that the price of college was relatively modest, but there was very little in the way of financial aid available.
I think it was interesting that you pointed out how these folks were dressed neat and all, and I've been interested in that everybody seems to think that the protest movement were primarily hippies, that out counterculture, but that there were so many divisions among SDS, the different groups. Could you comment on the SNCC, Students for Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, and that how they came together, but they also were fractured?
Yeah, and there were a number of like SDS and other groups that they were sort of like national initiatives. They had steering committees, and they would visit selected campuses. They would have a presence there. But I would stand by my general observation that for the heart of American college campuses was a fairly responsible, earnest student body, most of whom wanted to be good citizens. They wanted to be civil, they wanted to be informed, they wanted to be engaged, and they wanted reasonable job prospects. And that would remain at the core. Now, if you see from some of the photos I had, that does break down around 1968 and 69. It was interesting though, there was one very informed active student at Harvard named Stephen Kellman. And he came from an old line activist family in New York City, from the 1930s. And he did this kind of informal check on some of the student activists at Harvard. And he always asked them, like, well, would they demonstrate enough to forfeit going on to Harvard Business School or to Harvard Law School? And the answer was, by and large, a fairly pragmatic, savvy group. And you kind of knew when to say when. And then also, I think that is now, prosperous affluent families have a number of fallbacks that allow them to buffer their children from any youthful indiscretions or whatever. So I tend to hold in abeyance that preoccupation with the truly violent, truly radical extremes. They're there, they're visible, they're present. I don't know how lasting their influence was.
Thelin, Dr. Thelin, wanted to mention one of the more important lasting changes was the emergence of the role of women in the academy and on campus. Also, you note in the book that another important development was the emergence of black studies, which then opened up the door for women's studies, Chicano studies, etc. Maybe you could talk a little bit about those changes and sort of where they came about, how they came about.
And I did some kind of calendar checking, and my impression is that those tended to emerge as courses and legitimate, credit granting courses and departments and programs more in the 70s. Their roots and origins will come about in the late 60s, but it's pretty tough sledding. I think what we call black studies made inroads at a number of universities and colleges. Women's study would lag behind. The thing to keep in mind, and those of you who are veterans of curricular meetings, is that even a program or proposal that had a lot of support, the ritual and dynamics of getting something approved, like for degree granting or for credit, under best of circumstances, it takes a long, long time. And so I think you see the roots planted there, the remnants, but the fruition is going to come a few years later.
Probably have time for one or two more questions if we've got any.
And while you're pondering that, think about that. One of the greatest sources of student concern in the 60s was lecturers who would go on too long.
Anything else? Okay, if you would join me in thanking Dr. Thelin. Thank you very much. Have a good evening. No.